All right, I think we'll get started. My name is Stefanie Marotta. I'm the banking reporter at the Globe and Mail, and I cover the country's largest lenders as well as the industry's regulators. But fun fact, I actually used to work at one of the banks. I was a teller, and then I worked in communications, and in both of those roles, I supported business banking in some shape or form. So I'm absolutely thrilled that we're covering this topic and talking about the state of business banking. Now, whenever I talk to the banks and lenders, they all tell me that they provide products and solutions for businesses. But the needs of those companies are getting more and more complex. Canada has a massive small and medium-sized business market, and the evolving state of global trade and finance is making that even more complicated than ever. So how do we tackle those challenges, and what are lenders doing to help businesses work through those barriers? So we have a fantastic panel with us today to explore those topics. Cato Pastoll is the CEO and founder of Loop, a small business lending platform. Robin Stewart is BMO's Vice President of Business Banking Headquarters Operations. And Rob Khazzam, who will be joining us shortly, is the CEO and founder of Float, a spending management platform. So to kick things off, I'm going to start things very broad and throw this question out to both of you. We'll make sure we get Rob when he comes in. Given all of the challenges that businesses are facing in the current economic environment and the evolving digital needs that they have, what are the barriers that they're facing, and what are you doing to help them work through those issues? Cato, I'd love to start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're running a business and you ask anyone who's running a business, whether they're in this room or someone running a small mom and pop business, the challenge that everyone has is time. How do I offload more things that I'm doing 100 different things on a daily basis? How do I actually manage my time? How do I make sure that I'm able to tackle the things that I want to do in order to grow my business? That's a message that I think many people hear all the time, but maybe don't think about what are the ways in which we can solve that or address that for companies. And probably one of the most overlooked ways in which that's been solved is in financial services, right? Because in many cases, we just take the way that financial services works as a given. Like, I've got to go to collect payments from my customers in this way. Like, checks are the way to collect money, right? Or like, the only way to send a payment is go into a bank branch, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's certain constraints that exist, I think, in the current world that small businesses operate in. That I think don't need to exist. And so that's very much the lens at which we think through this challenge is, if I'm a business, how do we give them more time back in their day so they can operate and do the things that they love doing and focus on growing their business? That's what I'd add to.
I couldn't agree more with time as a key challenge. There's so many things being thrown at small business owners right now. Being able to give them back a little bit of time is key. And I think regardless of where you're at or what part of the financial services sector you're in, delivering speed as a core component of value and convenience as a core component of value to whatever it is that you're putting out of the marketplace, I think is really key. And I think about speed and convenience really in two big categories. I think the first is simplicity. We need to be making things simple. More and more small business clients have the same expectations and the same attention span for banking as personal banking clients do. And so taking what has historically been a very complex set of solutions and options for small businesses and making them really simple and easy to use, I think that's job number one for banks. I think job number two is integration. Part of why finances and banking takes up so much time for small businesses is because there are so many bits and pieces that the small business owner needs to bring together. I need my accounting platform. I need my payroll provider. I need my banking solution. I need my payment processor. I need to access all of those things separately. And so I think the other way we can really create value for small businesses as banks right now is through integration, bringing those services together into a common experience, a common platform, an end-to-end journey that small business owners can follow to get their banking done and then get on with, as you say, what they would much prefer to be doing, which is running and managing their business.
Nice to be here. I wasn't here for the question, but I obviously feel deeply passionate about this topic. I'm not sure how much I can add to what's already been said, but I think that as Canadians, we all need to raise our standards of what we expect from service providers. I think this is going on across the country, and if you're not meeting that standard, you won't survive. The business owners are the same people walking around right now with an app on their phone that allows them to order a car to travel anywhere they want in 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes or less, anywhere in the world. If you think about mobile travel, booking plane tickets, ordering food, every area of the consumer journey is decades ahead of where the business experience is in Canada, and so it's a great opportunity to change that, but I think the pressure is on, and I think that providers who don't speed up and catch up to that and deliver services in the way that customers want them are gonna lose. I think it's really as simple as that. Canadians are waking up to having higher expectations, and it's very difficult to explain to a Canadian why they can't do the thing in Canada that people all around the world are doing. And I think as a country, frankly, we should aspire to achieve a lot more. And I think we've been talking about that a lot in the media lately, in the technology community. More Canadians should be asking, how did we even end up here? And why does the business banking landscape in Canada feel like the 1980s when, as a consumer, it's 2024? And we all have a role to play in that. It's not just pointing at traditional institutions and service providers, but consumers should be demanding more, and people that work in the business community should wake up, because people are not going to wait that much longer for these services to get to them. They're just going to up and move, and they might move to a US service provider. And I actually think the thing that wakes Canadians up are Americans typically coming to Canada going, if you don't do this really well, we'll do it for you. And I've had that experience many times in my career, and I think as a nation, we might be waking up to some of that now.
So it's interesting to hear the commonality between all of the themes that you brought up: speed, convenience, need to meet your business customers where they are, and also the global competition that's the reality of the market. So I'd love to dive into the differences between where you guys play. And Cato and Rob, you play in an interesting space where you're trying to serve businesses in ways that the larger banks either don't or can't. So how do you play in this space? And do you view the banks as your competitors? How do you differentiate yourself and put yourself in a position to help small and medium-sized businesses where they can't get those services elsewhere?
Yeah, I mean, Rob and I have spoken about this. Like, I think that the entire market is so big, it's impossible to boil the ocean and just say, oh yeah, we can solve the problem for everyone. It's so big that, like, we're going to be a one be-all end-all solution to this whole problem that exists. So I mean, I would say from Loop's perspective and what we're building, we're very much focused on a segment of the market, and we're focused on a specific pain point that companies deal with, which is, I'm a business that operates out of Canada, but a lot of the things that I do on a daily basis actually exist outside of the Canadian market. More and more companies than ever have global supply chains. They work with vendors internationally. They have global customers, and the banking experience for them is really challenging because the original concept of banking was not built for that. It was built for local environments. I would go down to a local branch in my community and I would be able to do 99% of what I needed there. That's changed quite dramatically over the last 50 years. And so that's a particular pain that we are trying to solve at Loop, which is, this is the new paradigm that exists, not for every business, but for a significant number of businesses. And how do we solve their challenges? How do we build a better product and solution for them? I think it would be naive for us to think we can solve everybody's challenge. There's going to be certain challenges that other people in the market are just going to be better equipped to serve if they focus on that customer's pain point.
Rob, I'd love to hear your perspective on that as well, if you'd like to add something.
How we do that at Float, or how we play our part? Yeah, so if you're not familiar with Float, we're a B2B fintech that basically offers our customers what we believe is really the future of B2B payments in Canada, starting with a corporate card and a spend management platform that allows you to essentially empower your team, your employees, your leaders with corporate cards to invest in your business, but also, more importantly, software tools to automate everything around that experience. So no receipt collection, no invoice collection, no expense reports, no paper. We automate all of that away. And our vision is to build a platform that will deliver those types of modern financial experiences for businesses end-to-end across all of accounts payable and banking. And how we do this, we build everything from scratch. I don't believe in fixing things that are broken. I believe in building them from scratch. So we take customer experiences that we want to develop, and we say, I'm the customer. How would this work ideally for this person? They don't want to call a human, we're not offering that option. They don't want to send us PDF statements or fax us something, we're not giving them that option. How can we deliver an experience to them, for example, of getting an account set up with float and getting spending in 48 hours or less? And then we work backwards and say, well, what does it take to build that? And somewhere along the way, people in our business, really talented people will say, well, we have to make the customer do X. And then I argue with them, and we fight and debate until we've eliminated that point of friction. And so that, for us, is all about working backwards, starting with a customer experience and thinking about how can we make this the best possible experience, challenging our risk and compliance and operations teams to never ship the org structure to our customer. So if you interact with float, you interact with float. I don't care if it's our marketing team, our sales team, our support team, our risk team. If we ever tell you, I'm on the risk team, you're gonna have to talk to someone in X, that's bad customer service. We don't ship the organizational chart to the customer. It's not their job to navigate our business. It's our job to navigate their business. And then lastly is it's about recruiting world-class product builders. There's a lot of B2B finance that requires financial experience. I used to work on Bay Street. I did the CFA program. You have to know a lot about those things. But the technology products, in my opinion, should not be designed by bankers, myself included. They should be designed by world-class product developers, people that don't come from organizations that have never done that well. So we only recruit our product developers, our product designers, and our engineers from world-class consumer companies, because we think that they build products that people actually want to use, and we try to adapt those workflows for our business customer. And we've got a lot of work to do, but that's sort of how we think about it. How can we take experiences that have existed for a long time, build them from scratch, work backwards towards the customer experience, and challenge every part of our business to say, it's not good enough to manage costs, it's not good enough to generate revenue, you have to win the customer constantly. And to be ruthless about it, because if we don't do that, there are American companies that will do it. That's what I've learned in my career. You can get away with not doing this in Canada for periods of time. Americans would gladly love and come to beat us at our own game in Canada, and so that makes me get out of bed every day pretty fired up. So I don't view the banks as our competition. I think we all have a great opportunity to serve the market. I think everyone needs to operate way faster and with way more urgency. In my opinion, I think we're all moving really slowly in Canada. And I think people in this audience should start paying attention to that, and we should start paying attention to what's going on in open banking. We should start paying attention to what's going on in these discussions and ask ourselves, why are we so comfortable with this pace of change and modernization in Canada? Because we're falling behind big time.
I think that's a really good point about open banking, and I want to pin that for a second, because I like the little challenge that you brought up earlier in your remarks. And it's an intersection that I've been fascinated by for the many years that I've been reporting on business and tech at this point. And last year I wrote a story about the immense competition brewing between Canada's big banks, specifically in the commercial space. And on the flip side, for years I've been hearing about this tension with fintechs and the challenge that they're going to pose to the large Canadian banks and stealing pieces of that business pie. So Robin, when you look at the market now and you're looking at all of the work that BMO is trying to do to provide these types of services and solutions to customers, how do you view the competition in the market space with the fintechs that are on either side of you? And what do you need to do to meet those customers where your fintech competitors are already meeting them?
Yeah, I'm going to reject that narrative in the same way that Rob did just a minute ago. I think we need to partner as an ecosystem against global competition at the end of the day. From the perspective of a big bank, there's nothing more important to us than ultimately in this environment, this capital-hungry environment, than deposit taking. The business banking segment is a huge deposit gathering engine for our enterprise at the end of the day. So locking in those primary deposit relationships, there's nothing more important to us. And we know there are certain core capabilities that the big banks have, be it underwriting and risk management or providing holistic advice and guidance that are core to what we do, but our customers are looking for a provider who can bring not just those capabilities, but a really broad package of capabilities. Again, back to making it simpler, making it easier, integration of services at the end of the day. And so the opportunity for us in Canada, I think, is to work together as an ecosystem, which allows banks to play the role that we need to play for our enterprises in putting our arms around those core deposit relationships, and putting together the network of services, some provided by banks and some provided by partners, that will allow the customer to have those convenient end-to-end journeys. And we don't have global competitors coming into the market here in Canada, slicing off really tiny pockets of value and disintermediating us from our customers. At the end of the day, we want the Canadian financial services industry, full industry, to be there, managing those relationships, creating those incredible experiences, and improving the lives of Canadians from a financial perspective and otherwise.
Now, something that I hear a lot when I speak with smaller businesses and even those providers that serve those businesses is an issue with getting access to capital, especially in the market that we're in. And Cato, that's a pain point that you're trying to solve as well. So tell us a bit about when a business does come to Loop, what is it they're looking for and what is it that's brought them there?
Yeah, I mean, access to capital in some senses can be a misnomer, because the reason a company might need access to capital in many cases is actually because of some inefficiency that's existing in their workflow. So I'll just give you one example. We work with one particular customer who was waiting 60 to 90 days to get paid. And part of the reason for that was just that they were using a very legacy process. And because of that legacy process, the customer who was paying that, their end customer, wasn't able to initiate any type of payment that would happen in a short period of time. That created a working capital crunch for that business, and so they would be constantly needing to look for debt-like solutions to be able to fund that working capital gap, because they had payments to make now, but they're only going to collect those payments 60 or 90 days from now. In some cases, absolutely, you need a capital solution to that. There is a need to actually provide capital to the end business, but in other cases, a lot of things can just be streamlined, automated, and made more efficient, which solves a lot of the challenges that business owners have. I would say that, personally, through the journey of Loop, which I won't talk about today, but I can talk about another time, I saw originally that there was a working capital or access to capital problem. But if you actually go deeper into that problem, business owners don't want necessarily to solve that. They want you to solve all of the problems that they have related to financial services. They just want to be able to focus on operating their business. They don't want to think about how much do I need from this lender, what type of loan product do I need here, how do I finance this particular endeavor. They're very much focused on, at its core, business is very simple. I need to get paid and I need to make payments. How do I do those things in a way that's efficient, where the capital is always going to be there when we need it? And so that's very much the way that we think about it, is going to what Rob said. We're not thinking about this in the way that it exists today. We're not thinking because right now companies go and get a loan or a line of credit, let's just make a better loan or line of credit. We're thinking about, why does the customer have this problem, and how do we build a solution using technology to that problem?
Robin, I noticed you nodding your head in particular when Cato started talking about taking 60 to 90 days for a loan application and not being able to find some of those solutions that they're looking for. So I don't know if you'd like to respond to that or provide your perspective on that issue.
I couldn't agree more. It's again back to speed, which is where we started. I think in this marketplace you need to be able to adjudicate loans in 30 minutes, not 30 days. We've invested considerably at BMO to be able to provide that capability. And I think, to Cato's point, access to capital is a complex issue. There are all kinds of capital providers in the ecosystem with different risk appetites and different areas of interest with respect to where they want to deploy their capital at the end of the day. And so it's very difficult, I think, for business owners today to navigate that ecosystem and understand who is the right capital provider for them, how to bring together the experience of checking on the right capital providers and getting perhaps a right bundle solution. And is in fact capital the problem, or is it cash management or money movement or accounts receivable or any of those other kinds of things that can masquerade as a capital problem at the end of the day? And so I think the ability for us to move towards an ecosystem where it's easier for business owners to ask the general question of how do I manage money movement within my business and have the capital there where I need it, and get connected with the right service providers simply, quickly, efficiently, who can answer the question of, who is the right capital provider for you and how do I access it quickly and simply so it's there when I know it, or when I need it, excuse me. And then I would say the other piece that's important for us to be thinking about as an ecosystem is how are we delivering that experience for the mass market? And then how are we delivering that experience for segments of our entrepreneurial economy who may have been historically disadvantaged or face other barriers to access for that capital that are sort of outside of all of our core businesses or core control at the end of the day. And I think ensuring that we as an ecosystem are thinking about the unique needs of all of those segments where they do face additional barriers in access to capital and all the other tools needed to be successful as an entrepreneur, and making sure that we are deliberately breaking those barriers down for clients so that everyone can participate in the entrepreneurial economy, which drives all of our businesses and ultimately drives the economy itself, with small business being really that engine of innovation for Canada at the end of the day.
There's also been a lot of discussion around regulatory developments that could help enhance the type of work that would help businesses overcome these barriers. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here because I'm sure you all feel this way, but as a banking and tech reporter over some time, I feel like I've been waiting forever for open banking to actually get tabled, and it finally did in the recent budget. So I'm sure it's just been an ongoing narrative for all of you. But I'm curious, now that we've seen that development get introduced, and there's also a lot of discussion around payments infrastructure and real-time rails, Rob, I'd like to pick up on what you said about open banking and throw this over to you, and I'd love to hear more about how, if these regulatory hurdles were overcome, what would that mean for the services you're able to provide to business customers?
Yeah, why is this important? Canada lacks competition. We don't have a lot of competition in most of the industries in Canada. No one wants to say that, but it's true. And I think that the open banking framework is going to make it a lot easier for consumers and customers to have more choice, have more control over their data, make it easier to port services from one service provider to another, which if you're incumbent, you wouldn't like that. But if you're a customer, you should be really excited about that. And I think it's really important. I'm not very optimistic, candidly, about it. I'm optimistic that companies are going to will their way to the outcome that's required to serve their customers, and that means a lot of brain damage. It means a lot of extra costs. It means a lot of extra time and energy to deliver services that are much easier to deliver in other markets. I want to be optimistic. I'm personally not. I think that it's happening in a very Canadian way, which is very slow, very cautious. And I think that as a country, if this is what it takes to drive modernization of parts of our economy, and it's going to be led by the government, I think we should all be really wary of how quickly that's going to happen. And so I think it's important. It touches huge parts of the financial system. I don't think we should be cavalier about that. But I'm also not sure what we expect a huge committee of bankers and regulators to do for the country, and how that will push us into the future. I have concerns about the conflicts of interest, and a real concern around the speed with which these things are happening.
I got to jump in there and say that, we're excited about open banking too. Because that's what enables us, I think, to provide those best-in-class service experiences, those end-to-end journeys that clients really want at the end of the day. And so I do think that partnership between the big banks, the fintech community, and government is the path forward on open banking. I agree with you that it's not moving fast enough, and that we all need to get on board and push. And I think you're right that consumers need to push as well. But there's gold in open banking for everybody. Creating these kinds of incredible customer experiences that already exist in many markets around the world should be imperative for all of us in the industry.
Yeah, like I agree. I just think it's funny, like in the grocery industry now, it's like the government's inviting foreign competitors to come to Canada, and it's like, the whole purpose of a modern economy is that we create the conditions for competition and then let competition take care of the market. For some reason, everyone in Canada has been tricked into believing that like legacy institutions and the government are going to pull us into the future. I think it's the conditions that create the motivation and the interest for players like all three of us on stage to have healthy competition lead to good outcomes. So I've seen regulatory change in parts of time in my career. I worked at Uber. It didn't happen like this. I've never met a regulator anywhere in the world, and I did it in a bunch of places that ever ran very large committees in front of the entire country with the largest incumbent players guiding that. So I'm a little squirrely about it. And I think we're not loud enough as a country. I think people should be furious about what is taking place in Canada, and really concerned that if we don't sort this out quickly, this country is going to be past saving. It sounds really bombastic, but I don't know why Canadians are so surprised. These things are happening all over the economy, and we are always surprised. Start voting, start getting active, and start demanding more. If we want to be better, it starts by waking up and not considering and treating our country like an afterthought relative to other developed markets.
I think
these things got done, by the way, in Australia and other markets around the world in like 1/10 the time.
See, this is the fun part of my job, and I will be following up with all of you on that exact question, maybe for an article, we'll see. But one thing that this is pivoting a little bit, because I could talk about that topic for forever, and we only have a few minutes left. But Robin, when you and I were chatting before this, you brought up a fantastic point about the need to also address the gaps for underserved communities and business owners who don't get access to capital as easily, businesses who are run by women, people of color, other marginalized communities. And I think this is an incredibly important topic for us to focus on. And I'd love to hear your perspective on it. And then also, Cato and Rob, with the couple of minutes that we have left, how you're also looking at this from a local scale.
Yeah, thanks for bringing us back to that. This is a hugely important issue for Canada, for our competitiveness, for our productivity, and something that's really important to BMO. We've invested over the last couple of years in a series of programs that we call Zero Barriers to Business, where we really focus on partnering with underserved communities, getting involved in their communities, listening, hearing about the barriers that they face, not just in accessing capital, but in accessing mentorship and education and all the critical ingredients to being successful entrepreneurs. And what we can do as an incumbent institution to try to assist in either mitigating or breaking those barriers down at the end of the day. I really believe that as an industry, we have a real responsibility to partner more closely with these communities, listen harder, understand better what these systemic or historic injustices are that have caused these problems, and be active in breaking them down as active as we should be in modernizing the industry at the end of the day. And I think there's a role for both big institutions and small to play in that process. I'm as interested as you are to hear what's happening on the fintech side on that.
Cato.
Yeah, I won't go back to the open banking point, but I actually, funnily enough, will say that these things are tied together. Our business was called Lending Loop before. We originally exclusively were a small business lender before we kind of broadened into a more broad, financial technology platform that does a lot of different things. We did a survey of our existing customers through Lending Loop with the Government of Canada, actually with Statistics Canada. And we looked at the businesses that we serve through this digital-only platform versus the businesses that traditional incumbents serve, and found that we serviced between 3 and 5 times more underrepresented groups, including women, through our platform. Yet, when it came to 2020, the pandemic, and then the ensuing programs to support those entrepreneurs, the government did not leverage any financial technology platforms, didn't leverage any fintech businesses, any fintech lenders to be able to actually distribute capital to those underrepresented groups. So I do think that this is a place, again, where I will be critical. Like, we talk a little bit outside both sides of our mouths as Canadians, as a government, because if we want to actually see change happen, we have to take some risks and we have to go and invest in places that have a better way of allocating that capital. And so there is hope because there are better ways to do it, but unfortunately, I don't think we're doing all that we can be doing. There's opportunity, but let's see.
Well, thank you all so much for your participation. We've run out of time. I could keep talking to you about this forever, but thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights, and thank you for being with us this afternoon.